This is the solution to the puzzle, how many squares? I'll just point out that there are lots of squares in the background that are little purple squares. I'm not trying to count those in this puzzle. I'm just looking at how many of the black squares there are. The reason most people get this wrong is because they just randomly start trying to count squares. A good way of counting the squares to make sure that you don't miss any out is to start by counting the smallest squares. After that, start counting the next smallest, and keep going till you get to the biggest square. So the smallest square is shown here. You can see that there are 4 of them here and 4 of them under it, which makes a total of 8 of the smallest squares. The next smallest square is shown highlighted here. You can see in the middle there are 2 of those, so we'll add that to our 8. Then we'll count the ones in the rest of the puzzle. So you can see one highlighted here, and if we count acrossways, we'll see that there are actually 4 of them. We then have to count how many rows of these squares there are. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that makes 4 rows of 4, which we can add to what we've already counted. The next smallest square is shown here. As we go across, we have 1, 2, 3 squares shown here. And then we count how many rows of these squares we have. There's 1, 2, and 3. So that gives us 3 rows of 3, which we add to our total. The next smallest square is highlighted here. So we have 1, 2 going across, and then counting downways, we have 1, 2. So we have 2 rows of 2, which we add to our total. Finally, the largest square is around the outside, and obviously there is only 1 of that. So we add that to our total, which gives us the answer, which is 40 squares. Just before we leave this, I just want to point out that 8 plus 2 were the squares in the centre of the puzzle. The rest were the rest of the squares. So if we look at this gives us a really good pattern for how to count squares in a puzzle like this. So if I was to ask how many squares in this puzzle, you could follow this kind of pattern to count them. So if you want to have a go, just pause for a second. You should get the answer that there were 6 rows of 6 of the smallest square, then 5 rows of 5 of the next smallest square, and so on until you get to the biggest square, which is 1 row of 1, and that would have given you 91 squares.